What wedding moment made you think they are not going to last long? Story 1. When she went alone on her honeymoon because she booked a trip to the Caribbean despite her newlywed husband having a severe sun allergy edit. Because this kind of blew up and I saw some mean comments about her. She was a good friend, and they had been together for some years. They married young, and it didn't occur to them that it would be strange if she went on the honeymoon and he stayed behind. He was a good guy and just wanted to see her happy, and she really wanted to go on this vacation because she had never left the country. They separated half a year after the wedding, and my friend, the bride, told me that the marriage had been a way to prolong the relationship despite both of them knowing that it was already over some time before they got married. Kinda like a couple gets a baby to save a marriage. It really was just sad because they were a nice couple, but they stayed friends after separating. And I can guarantee that she didn't cheated on him while away. They were both really loyal. About his sun allergy, he had red hair, a really fair skin, and burned up within minutes. And I mean really bad sunburn, the kind you have to go to the hospital for. He always had to wear sungles, long-armed shirts, and a hat, even on cloudy days, so the vacation was not for him. Story 2. Groom got into a fist fight with the father of the bride. Split after 4 months. Context. Groom and bride's dad, actually most people in these families, if I'm honest, have pretty aggressive drinking problems. Father-in-law has always hated him. I wasn't around for what actually set it off, but it ended when the bride got in the middle, got an elbow in the eye, and the happy couple left for the night. This was in rural Canada. Not Letterkenny, but basically Letterkenny. I'd say the father-in-law won the fight tough. Story 3. The entire bridal party, including parents of the wedded couple, entering into a betting pool of W long the marriage would last at the wedding reception. YRC the best man won, Price is Right rules, at 14 months. Story 4. I was the best man at a wedding a few years back. At the rehearsal dinner, his future in-laws were treating him like they were bossing him around, making him do, and talking down to him. They didn't let him hang out with his groomsmen afterwards while the bride went out and got drunk. They are now divorced. Edit to add a little detail. Yes, he sort of stood up for himself. His ex's parents were making him do for the wedding the next day, and he was too nice to say no. For you youngsters out there, this is cliché, but you really do marry the family, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree a lot of the times. Story 5. When the maid of Nor professed her love for my brother during her toast at my brother's wedding, and her husband walked up to the head table, picked her up, and carried her away before she could embar him further. They lasted about 3 months after that. My brother and his wife, on the other hand, are still happily married 20 years later. Story 6. The groom took the stupid cake thing to an extreme. The bride had given him his bite and mushed a little on his chin or nose. He then took a piece and mashed it into her face so hard that I was expecting her to end up with a nose. Cake and frosting got up her nose, in her eyes, down the front of her dress, etc. The bride had to go get cleaned up, had her makeup redone, and was ugly crying within an of saying, "I do." He didn't give a... Story 7. I was at the wedding of one of my mom's oldest friends, and she clearly had more fun dancing with the best man after the wedding. Long story SRT, they dated for a while after the divorce. Story 8. The groom and best man had a dancing routine for getting into the church ceremony, and they got nearly halfway through it, and I guess the groom felt they hadn't received much applause and wows from us, the attendees, and decided to go back to the entrance and start all over. Sigh. Story 9. When the groom started off his speech by saying, "We all know I didn't want to get married, but we're here for underscore 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 bride, underscore 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 and underscore underscore child we had together, underscore underscore underscore." 1 year, 3 months later, they were finished. Story 10. The groom had a best woman instead of a best man. Nothing wrong with that, but her toast left the WLE room in awkward silence because she was clearly in love with him. Story 11. Had an old boss W was divorced. He told me once, "I sort of known it wasn't going to last when the only happy moment I had on my wedding day was when I snuck out to smoke weed with my buddies in the parking lot." Story 12. When they disappeared for half an hour during the reception, they were both saving themselves for marriage and were desperate to bone down, which is a fine thing to want. But it turns out that was more or less the main reason they got married. They made it almost a year. Story 13. I was kindly included in a last-minute +1 to the wedding of a family friend W I'd never met before. At the rehearsal dinner, or the German equivalent, the Polterabend, the guests smashed ceramic and porcelain items on the ground. I was fresh in Germany, so this was all pretty out of context and frightening. But my boyfriend explained that it's a tradition, reminding the couple that life is sometimes difficult and you have to work together to clean it up. The bride kind of half-heartedly motioned to the groom to sweep it up. He did a little bit, then just moved on to talk to his friends, leaving most of the shards strewn around the yard. Additionally, I don't think I saw the couple talk to each other once over the next 3 days of celebrations. It was a gorgeous wedding, and I'm so grateful that I was invited. Really good way to begin living in a new country, but it wasn't surprising to hear that they divorced a few years later. Story 14. I was at a wedding when a peony went off during the ceremony. In the middle of exchanging vows, it was the groom's. He took the call. They are divorced now. Edit to add. I believe it was a cousin calling to ask if they were late for the wedding. Story 15. Wedding photographer here. I can think of a few. Full-blown row during dinner, had another couple fistfight during a first dance. An infamous one for me was leaving a venue late one night, and as I'm walking to the train, I can see the bride down an alley, on her knees with the best man. I was the wedding photographer for a reality TV SW. End of the night, I'm having a few drinks with the film crew, and the groom has come up to me and one of the producers and says, I think I've made a big mistake. So we're trying to be reassuring and telling him it's natural to second-guess such a bit decision, to which he replies, no, I think I'm gay. I had them both on Facebook. The drama the next week was mesmerizing to watch unfold. I've got a ton of these stories edit. Since you asked, was working with a video guy, W had the bride and groom on radio mics. Sat around waiting for the evening action to kick off, and the video dude called me over and said, listen to this. Groom was talking to one of the bridesmaids about WW, they had to end their affair now he's married. Not a W could you tell they wouldn't last, but sewing in an old church on the test day of the year, watching the groom wait for the bride and he's swaying back and forth. Next thing he's fainted, fallen forward and slammed his mouth into a stone step, smashed his front teeth out, blood everywhere, had a bride and groom on a O-line for PTOs. Groom's heading downward, bride's about to go up. He lands on her dress just as she goes up and she pops out the top of the dress, flailing around in the air. Saint a Traveler wedding, which erupted into a mive brawl. Watched a drunk usher knock over a wedding cake. Weddings are amazing. I've been doing this for about 12 years and seen some sights, but I still love sewing them even now. Story 16. When he smashed the cake in her face and hair, then went off drinking with his buddies. In 12 weeks, she filed. Good thing I didn't buy an expensive gift. Story 17. He complained she was mean to him through their dating life. The day before the wedding, all of the groomsmen and the groom's friends told him not to marry the girl. Like straight up, they lasted less than a year. Story 18. The most beautiful wedding I've been to ended in divorce. Venue was where the groom's father is buried, and he cried as he made his vows to the bride there. Turned out he'd been cheating on her for months, and they divorced a while later. Something so repugnant about marrying someone you're cheating on practically over your father's grave. To date, it's the only wedding I've been to that ended in divorce. Story 19. They got secretly married at the local town hall out of spite to the girl's father. W did not agree with the relationship. This happened right out of high school, and they divorced during my sophomore year at college. Story 20. I used to work for an event center that stead a lot of weddings pre-COVID. After one ceremony, I saw the groom slap the butt of one of the bridesmaids in the hallway. She laughed and with a big smile said, "Oh, Jeremy, you'll never change." Edit. Thank you so much to the kind people who gave me my first Reddit awards. Story 21. Swede up to the wedding of a friend of my husband's W I knew casually. When we arrived at the church, the groom was very drunk in the parking lot and getting drunker by the minute. I thought it was kinda nuts since it was a full Catholic ceremony, which involved lots of kneeling and standing. I honestly have no idea how he made it taught that, but he did. At the reception, he proceeded to continue the drinking party while his new wife cried in the washroom. When it was time for the first dance, he kind of stumbled around the dance floor despite a year of dance lessons. When it was time for him to take his new wife's garter off and throw it to the bachelors, he instead did a striptease type dance and got himself down to his underwear in front of many elderly family members. People were socked and talking, and all in all, it was a SW. I gave this marriage a year or two tops. They, however, are still married 25 plus years later. Story 22, I was maid of honor. Me, best man and the couple went into a separate little room to do the signing stuff. Bride excused herself to go to the bathroom, and the groom started making pretty mean remarks about her cooking, such as she's pioneered about, to the officiary. She came back, heard they were talking about cooking family meals together, and gave him the warmest smile, thinking he had praised her. He scoffed awkwardly and changed the topic. That always stuck with me. He wasn't laughing with her, but at her, behind her back. They lasted 7 months. Story 23. The bride and groom did the first dance, then spent the rest of their reception completely apart from each other, getting faced with their own separate friend groups. The only other dancing all night was the bride dancing with her high school friends, the father-daughter dance, and the mother-son dance, during which the groom was crying. The best man's speech didn't mention the bride at all, and basically boiled down to groom. You're married now, but our bond is older and stronger. All of our hunting and fishing trips together are the best thing in our lives. Can't wait for more. Such a sad, desperate atmosphere. They made it a little over 1 year. They made Story 24. My husband was the best man at a wedding. The bride was a nightmare, not just during the wedding, but in general, everyday life. All of the friends hated her, and she had no friends of her own. We knew it was doomed when, during the portraits, the bride was making everyone miserable as can be. The groom said, exact words, "Hash, I'll just send her to therapy, and if that doesn't work, we can just get divorced." Edit, for emphasis. Story 25. The ceremony was delayed because the bride and groom were on the P&E with the groom's mother. W refused to come to the wedding, trying to be talked into still going through with it. Apparently, they had a huge and physical fight the night before. Their roommate at the time didn't come either. He told me what he saw in the use the night before was enough for him to know this wedding was doomed, and they should not be dating, let alone getting married. Edit in an attempt to answer some of these questions. First, this was about 20 years ago, and we are all in our 40s now, and have moved on with life since. So, I don't know why the mother wasn't there. I just remember thinking it was weird when I noticed she wasn't, and then later heard they were on the P&E with her. The roommate was visibly angry when I went to pick him up for the wedding. Outright refused to come, and I think ended up moving out and basically disappearing after. He was a big dude who worked as a bouncer at clubs, and my impression was he had to go into work mode the night before in his living room and wasn't happy about it. I never heard details, and I wouldn't have felt right asking for them. I am still friends, in the sense that I see them every few years, with both the bride and groom. See my comment below for W they turned out. Happy ending considering. I should also add, the years in which they dated and got married, all of us were very heavy binge drinkers. We were in our 20s and worked service industry jobs. It seemed normal almost for this much drama to be around. Looking back, I don't have the same opinions. No one involved ended up in rehab or prison, and all live relatively normal lives now. Story 26. The bachelor party and the bachelorette party were in Vegas at the same time, across the hall from each other. The bride and groom got in a huge fight on the last night of the trip, and when I was leaving I said, "I'll see you guys at the wedding," to the groom, and he replied, "I'm not sure there's going to be one." There was a wedding, but they were divorced within 18 months, I believe. Story 27. One of my friends got married. Afterwards, she looked at me, crying, and said, "What did I do?" They were separated by the time the plane landed from their honeymoon. He was a good guy, she was a mess. The betta fish and the flower centerpieces lasted longer than the marriage. Story 28. My wife got invited to a client's daughter's wedding. The couple were both drama students. Many of the bridal party were drama students. The maid of Noor's toast consisted of tearful declarations of unrequited love to the groom, along the lines of, "If it couldn't be me, I'm glad it's my best friend that's marrying you." The best man's speech was a lusty declaration of, "If it doesn't work out, call me babe, like the previous time you called me." Other toasts were similarly weird. A guy at the table I was seated at was a friend of the bride and said to me that he was this close to standing up during the "speak now or forever hold your peace" thing. I'm still not sure if the WLE thing was a bunch of emotionally ed-up 20-year-olds or one big piece of performance art. Story 29. My brother's ex-wife. Through the exchange of vows, she was looking at everyone but my brother, making sure all eyes were on her. Later, she instructed the photographer, a family friend W was cheap, to mingle and get SAS of people being happy. Within 10 minutes, she'd summoned the photographer back suiting. "Do you see wedding is this? I meant get STS of people being happy asterisk 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 for me asterisk asterisk asterisk." Edit. Tut, I'd add, they broke up when she cheated on him. Apparently that marriage she was desperate for was only good while it brought her attention. Story 30. Wedding videographer here. I think my favorite moment was when I was sitting at the miscellaneous table with all the randoms and the girl next to me. The groom's ex drunkenly admitted to sleeping with the groom a few months prior. Story 31. I was the maid of Noor. They seemed like the perfect couple, together for nearly 10 years, and had this big, expensive, beautiful wedding. Bride would have been happy with a small event, but told me groom had a big family and had insisted. Alarm bells hit when I sat with her parents in the front row and realized the groom-to-bride ratio was so mightily off. The groom had 3 best men, as well as ushers, etc. His sister and one best man read something during the ceremony, and then all 3 said long speeches about him at dinner. It was all about him. The photographer was even his friend's mum, so she kept whisking away the boys for these hilarious lad sots. The bride was ignored most of the day, and in the evening he got too drunk, spilt a drink over her wedding gown, and danced with his friends. It felt more like a big birthday party than a joint event. I'd never seen that side to him, but I felt so sorry for my friend. It was like she was just there to be a prop to his plans and look good. 3 months after the wedding, he began being emotionally abusive. A month after that, he admitted he'd been having an affair for years, then left. If I hadn't seen the way he behaved at the wedding, I never would have guessed he had that in him. Edit. As so many people are being kind, I'll update you. My friend hasn't been able to trust or date again yet, and it's been 4 years. However, she has become an amazingly brave woman who's traveled to some amazing places alone and is now retraining to change careers. I think she learned never to be a backseat penger in a relationship again. Honestly, the way she handled the WLE thing with such grace and determination makes me so proud to be her friend. She basically told him when he left that he would never see her or hear from her or about her again. She dropped all friends that had a connection with him after he left and made sure he would always live his life wondering if he made the right decision and what she was up to. I really pee his dying tut is about her, and I know for a fact hers won't be about him. She'll find real love. Story 32. My best friend's wedding is tomorrow, and I told her about I've heard several wedding photographers, videographers, say that swing cake in the face is almost a for sure factor that they're going to divorce. She told me, oh yeah, I told him not to, but he probably will anyways, so we'll see this goes. Update. She put the cake in his mouth respectfully, but he booped her nose 2 or 3 times, which wasn't huge, and they just laughed it off. I cried a couple times during this wedding because their love does seem very genuine. So sorry if this wasn't the update you were ping for LOL, but I'll give a 1-year update. Story 33, I live for these threads. Anyway, I know a photographer W was offered to sod a wedding on the Gold Coast, Australia. If you're from Australia, then you know the Gold Coast, while beautiful, has a lot of Jersey SRE types living there. It's kind of like Miami, but no celebrities and very, very trashy. My friend is getting STS of everybody getting dressed up at the same time because the groom, groomsmen, bride, and bridesmaids are all getting ready in the same room. The groom decided to have his bucks party, bachelor stag do, the night before, so they're all hungover as and snorting line after line of coke, something that is making my photographer friend's job hard because she can't get any nice STS of the groom or groomsmen without these illicit drugs in view. The energy in the room is getting uncomfortable, so the bride asks if they could take it easy on the coke and get a couple of nice PTOs. The groom yells, "Shut up!" and keeps snorting. The girl W got my friend the gig said they divorced like 4 months later. Another friend of mine was pressured into marrying his girlfriend of like 8 years because she dropped an ultimatum. Propose to me within a year or we're done. He does so, they get married, but of every wedding PTO she posted on Facebook, neither one of them looked happy. They divorced barely a year into their marriage. Story 34. When they got married illegally in high school, 2 16-year-olds from different states W had to lie on their certificate to get approved by the state. It was annulled when the father of the groom found out. Story 35. I'm a wedding photographer and I have a few of these. When a very young, not dating long couple say things like the partner is perfect and we never fight. When there's name calling, I particularly cringed at, it's because we so get each other and are so comfortable that he can call me dumb as a nickname. They didn't last the year. One where the wedding was all about the groom promoting his band. He even sang his bride a song that was literally just him swing off his vocal range with some click piece. She stood up and joined him on stage halfway through, and he looked annoyed that he had to share the limelight. They lasted about 2 years. He was sleeping with the other vocalist in the band. Story 36. At my wedding, she paused for a long second before saying yes. The woman marrying us was like, oh, she's thinking about it. She laughed it off and said yes. We lasted 3, almost 4 years married. Story 37. This was my sister's best friend, and it was a bachelorette party moment. Bride had been having an affair. Everyone knew it. The groom's friends tried to tell him, but she convinced him they were making it up. I mean, at that point, it was just sad. She actually had to force fiancé to apologize to the guy she was sleeping with for the accusation. The night of the bachelorette party, she actually took all her bridesmaids back to the other guy's use and spent the night with him. He came to their wedding. It was so awkward. Everyone knew and everyone was talking. The groom was told, but CSE to overlook it. After the wedding, she insisted the other guy come on vacations with her and her husband and included him in all their social functions. Now, if they're non-monogamous, whatever, go crazy. But her husband was an absolute wreck about it for years, and she just kept gaslighting him. No one could convince him to leave her. She told my sister that affair guy insisted he would never marry her and didn't want kids, so she was using fiancé to get them. They ended up divorcing 2 years later after their second child was born. She immediately moved in with affair guy and they did end up getting married. Edit. I wanted to add a little more context since this comment blew up a bit. Everyone involved in this story was really young, except affair guy. He had already been married and divorced and had a few kids of his own by then, but he was still well under 30. The original couple had been together since middle school, and all this went down between the ages of 21, 23. I think the husband was just really naive and invested in the relationship. Small town, marry your high school sweetheart and live happily ever after bull. Affair guy did not go with them on their honeymoon, but he was included in group vacation plans before and after the wedding. Other people in the friend group did start refusing to go if he was involved. The bride had this really twisted power move that husband was not allowed to disrespect or offend affair guy. Any jealousy or suspicions were his own insecurities, and anyone who said they were sleeping together just didn't understand platonic friendship. Affair guy was just a good friend, her best friend really, and husband needed to get over it. Bride and affair guy are still married and the second child is likely actually his. Groom married a girl they went to high school with and seems content. Story 38. When he raised his eyebrows and gave her a knowing look during the for richer or for poorer portion of their vows. For context, he was a newly drafted pro athlete, and she was a big fan of his signing bonus. Story 39. YTF am I reading this the morning of my wedding? Edit for anyone interested. It went great, other than me losing my ring during pictures. Thank you all for the well wishes, it means a lot to us both. Lots of love for everyone. Story 40. I worked at a nice restaurant in NOLA. Bride is lovely, she is excited and very receptive to our suggestions on things in their budget. Groom is an insufferable know-it-all. He's bargain hunting. Crab cakes don't cost that much, what if I buy them and you serve them? On their big day, am elding the door as they walk out the first time as husband and wife. W. We got married, am so happy. H. Not really, we gotta fill out paperwork and file it with the state. You've seen 3-week-old balloons less deflated than that poor woman. I pee she got out of there. Story 41. At my boyfriend's sister's wedding, the groom got drunk before the vows and smoked weed after the vows. Was crossfaded as, and made a fool of himself. When we went up to congratulate them after, she refused to be near him or take pictures with him. It was awkward. After the speeches, basically everyone left. After the family was still around and they opened gifts. Someone gifted nice champagne, and the groom tried to open it and dropped it and it shattered. Bride stormed off screaming. Groom got upset and started cussing out the air. They still went to their honeymoon together in Florida, and she got pregnant almost immediately. Maybe 7 months into her pregnancy, she kicked him out because he slept with her roommate. They got divorced when their kid was 6 months old. But it's for the best. The dude is a puss and wasted a lot of their money by being selfish on their day. Story 42. I'm witnessing one from the sidelines now. My wife's brother just got married this past May. Bride's mother is a big DIY person and went a little nuts with extra flowers, table pieces, decorations, etc. Note I said extra. It was already decorated by the venue. She just took it upon herself to buy and add way more stuff. Anyway, a few weeks ago, she sends my MIL, groom's mom, an email with receipts of all the extra stuff she bought, $7,000 worth, and asked that she pay half since it was technically set up in time for the rehearsal dinner for guests to enjoy. It's causing a huge rift between the newlyweds since the bride is taking her mom's side. Story 43. My wife is an event planner with a particular talent for higher-end weddings. I'm talking about $150K and up for the reception, venue/catering/decor/music, alone. The best I've heard from her is the following. Bride and her mother were discussing terms of the prenuptial agreement on the day of the wedding while doing hair and makeup. Something about a 1-year clause after which the terms eased, and the bride could exit the marriage with a nice payout. So I guess the marriage lasted at least a year? Story 44. She had a panic attack while getting ready that he wouldn't SW up, while implying he didn't actually want to be married again. But they were too far into it for him to back out. They were both barely 21, and it was his second marriage. Did I mention they got engaged 6 weeks after they met? And they only waited that long because his divorce wasn't final. She was relieved when he did SW, and only had a few STS to build up his courage to be there, i.e., he was faced by 11 a.m. They separated a year later, but she somehow ended up pregnant around the same time. They got back together, for the baby, and then divorced when the baby was 2. Within a month of separating, she and their kid was living with a new guy that she had known for 3 weeks. ETA. Please don't share elsewhere, etc., etc. Story 45. He ended up at the emergency room between the ceremony and the reception. He went out the night before with his sister and friends and got plastered. They had to lead a cold pack to the back of his neck to keep him vertical during the wedding PTOs. Marriage lasted 30 days until they had a fight. She left the use, and he filled the U-Haul truck with everything but her clothes. Story 46. Not at the wedding itself, but when my spouse and I went to pick up our marriage license, we encountered a young man suiting at his fiancée outside the building because she had failed to remind him to bring the right IDs. We were like, big yikes. IP, they're doing okay. Story 47. Portuguese wedding. Fist fight broke out at the head table during the reception between two groomsmen. They were arguing about which of them had slept with the bride first. Groom was oblivious. He came from work early one day 2 years later and caught her in bed with another man. Surprised it took that long. Midnight buffet was amazing tough. Story 48. When my cousin and her husband said I semi-promise in their vows. As in, I semi-promise to love and nor blah blah blah. I have no idea WTF it was supposed to mean, but I guess it sounds better than, I'll try, but if it's too hard, I'm out. Weird twist. They've been married 30 plus years now. Story 49. High school friend of mine married a 26-year-old Marine W. she had been dating for a year. Any situation where a 25-plus-year-old person is waiting on someone to turn 18 to get married is not going to end well, IMO. Story 50. My wife's cousin said, I hate his Ing family. They're complete trash. And also said something to my wife about being such an unsatisfying poor groom, died in a motorcycle accident a few years later as they were planning their divorce, and she's been with a different dude every month since. Story 51. Where to start? The best man was the groom's coke dealer W dressed in a tux. The only one in a tux. The groom was high on coke and giggled through the WLE ceremony. The set of the party alternated between arguing with his wife in Russian and running up to us every time he saw us, the bride's friends, the only people that sweat up from her side for the wedding. Whenever he saw us in groups of 2 or more and tell us, don't smoke weed if she, his wife, won't let me smoke weed in the use, then you guys can't. Every time. We grouped up. Story 52. After the wedding, my friend's new wife, W was fairly quiet in public, was screaming at my friend's family telling them it was the last time they would be seeing them, and W terrible they were. It was hard to watch. 2 years later, my friend walked in on her and a dude. That was that. Story 53. Prior to my wedding, I'd asked my husband to practice dancing with me because I'm uncoordinated due to a disability. He blew me off and said we'd be fine. As we were dancing, he spoke in my ear, not even quietly. What are you doing? What's wrong with you? You're embarring me! We lasted 2 years. Leaving was the best decision I ever made. Story 54. My uncle, when he broke his neck trying to break dance on his stag do, he went down the aisle in a wheelchair. She divorced shortly after. He can walk again now, but because of his surgery, he cannot turn his neck. One of my go-to stories because it's insane. Story 55. Friend's wedding back in 2016. Somewhat nice affair for us, given we were in our early 20s and all. I was a bridesmaid and really hadn't met the groom much prior. He was nice, but quiet. Day before wedding the bride, a longtime friend asked me to help babysit one of the groomsmen because he was a nightmare. Asked me, other bridesmaid DJ, the works to help cut him off from alcohol before the ceremony. Not to allow him to make a speech, keep him from hitting on girls. The works. He was an alcoholic with 6 kids and 2 DUIs, but was the absolute best friend of the groom. Day of the wedding, Best breaks into the bar, gets hammered, has to be dragged down the aisle, gets the florist drunk while they pretty much have on the dance floor, and makes what I can only to be a speech during the father-daughter dance. The bride was Ed and stressed as well, trying to get things to not be a total SW. Groom blocked us from keeping him in check, wanted us to just let it go while he did everything the bride asked he not do. It was like a weird purposeful or intentional self-sabotage thing. Douche also broke into the groom's private stash of me-made mead he'd made special just for the wedding, stripped his clothes, and ran through the parking lot hiding in bushes at 11 p.m. Same night, the couple texted me asking if I'd want to be their third in their open relationship, which I find out later was mostly the groom's idea. I also found out later they got married pretty quickly because she suddenly needed medical benefits, all the while he had been asking for an open relationship for the complete duration of them being together, but she'd only acquiesce if he would marry her as well. Divorce finalized a year and a half later. A year. Edit to add, no, I did not join them, don't where you eat. And no, stop asking if I'm X or Y person. Some of y'all have apparently lived through very similar situations apparently, but stop asking if you know me. I may have posted, but I have no intention of doxing myself or the people in this story. Story 56. Bride was pregnant and about 3 months away from giving birth. A couple of people knew there was an extremely good chance that the baby could be a different ethnicity than that of the groom. Baby was born, and indeed she was. We didn't think it would last, but the groom brought the child up as his own, and they are still happily married. Story 57. This wasn't specifically a wedding moment, but rather a reception moment. Here's the basic background information. The couple in question had been married on some tropical island or another, and since the majority of their friends and family hadn't been able to attend the ceremony, they had decided to throw a lavish party upon their return. This had prompted the pair to spend borderline absurd amounts of money on what might very well have been the tackiest celebration I've ever seen. Imagine renting out the cafeteria at an elementary school, then hiring a celebrity, WW happens to be a half-blind orangutan, to decorate it. Commission the services of an expensive caterer, but require them to serve only the sort of slop that you'd find at a low-rent county fair, citing the fact that nobody likes fancy. Finally, enlist a disc jockey WSC idea of an appropriate first dance song is Freaks of the Industry by Dial Underground. I'm exaggerating, obviously, but that really was the song that they CSE. Now, everyone has different tastes, and it might seem reasonable to that the newlyweds were getting exactly what they wanted. That was what I had been telling myself anyway, until certainly before the money dance, the announcement of which was the first time that I'd ever even heard of the tradition, when I overheard a suggestive piece of gossip. The couple had apparently already argued about the amount that had been spent on the reception, with the bride claiming that the wheel thing was a disaster, and the groom insisting that it was Clyaz. He had been so certain of this, in fact, that he had used his new wife's credit card to pay for it. She had reportedly been rather upset when she'd found out about that, and had temporarily kicked him out of the use, which had prompted him to stay with an old girlfriend. Asterisk. Something asterisk untoward had allegedly occurred during the man's exile, but details were lacking, and his spouse had decided to forgive him. That was already bad enough. But the rumor, at least as I understood it, was that the aforementioned money dance was supposed to help them recoup their financial losses, with the implication being that the future of their marriage was riding on them receiving upwards of $32,000 in a 4-minute period. As I considered all of this, and as I mentally added up the amounts being pinned to each partner, I found myself thinking, yeah, this isn't going to last. TLDR. Grifting groom gets grabby, gormlessly gambles gaiety. Asterisk, asterisk.